America are kind of Oregon, Washington, Northern California. And in those areas, it's a very, very strong community of these independent bookstores. And so we went out to those stores before the book came out and sat down and had lunch with all of the proprietors and their staff and people from the community and just talked about this book and what it was all about. And I don't know whether that worked. I mean, maybe it did. It certainly was consistent with the ideas of the book that there would be a small number of socially influential people who could be the kind of the typhoid Marys of this particular epidemic. And we made a concerted effort to find and engage those people very early on in the process.
Your website says that people who understand the tipping point have a way of decoding the world around them. Now, does the tipping point idea help decode, for example, the financial crisis or Barack Obama's election victory? Can we use it as a key to unlock?
Yeah, I mean, does it tell you everything? No. Is it a kind of useful rubric for thinking about various aspects of those two phenomena? Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's what these books are. They're kinds of ways of organizing experience, right? Barack Obama's a kind of a funny case because he's very, his story is sort of, A, very complicated, and B, I think we're only beginning to understand what went into that victory. But certainly he uses his mastery of non-traditional media and of things like word of mouth is unparalleled in American political history. The financial crisis is a much clearer example of what I was talking about in Tipping Point because it's all about contagion, isn't it? It's a virus spreads through the financial markets, and it's been driven, all of this meltdown has been driven by fear, and fear is the most contagious of all emotions.
Just a reminder that you're listening to The Interview on the BBC World Service with me, Carrie Gracie, and my guest today, journalist and thinker Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm, by the time you wrote your next book, you had conclusively tipped as almost an intellectual brand. Blink, that second book, is about an appraisal made in the first 2 seconds, as we said when we first met just a moment ago. How does that work?
Well, you know, as human beings, we, for evolutionary reasons that make a great deal of sense, we're very good at jumping to conclusions, particularly about people. If you think about our ancestor millions of years ago, when he confronts some beast in the jungle, he has to decide very, very quickly whether that beast is a threat or not, right? And if the beast is a threat, he has to take action, probably to run. And he doesn't have 5 minutes to do that. He has to, and when he meets another human being, he has to decide, is that person on my side or not on my side? And again,
and then that makes perfect sense. And then everyone's going to be thinking, so what?
Well, we carry that with us, right? That kind of capacity to make up our minds really unconsciously, very, very quickly. And we've carried it with us into the modern world, where conditions have changed dramatically, where we're not really running into people in the street that much and having to decide instantly whether they're friend or foe. So it has both created a set of opportunities for us and, just as importantly, created a set of real problems, right? Because we have this tendency to go boom, and that tendency can be exceedingly dangerous if we're in situations where what we need to know cannot be gathered in the blink of an eye.
Okay, well, give us an example then, if people are struggling to get a grip on your idea here, an example of where we're making a 2-second judgment which is dangerous.
Prejudice. You know, you're a blonde Anglo-Saxon. Suppose I have some deep-seated aversion to blonde Anglo-Saxons, and you walk in the room, I see that there you are, and I jump to the conclusion that, suppose I think that blondes are dumb. I see you have blonde hair, I think she's dumb.
Maybe you're right.
I don't think so, but like that is an exceedingly harmful conclusion. There's no basis in fact. There's no correlation between intelligence and the color of your hair. And so by making and leaping to that conclusion, I have I've closed my mind and my heart to you in some way, right? Now that may have been that years and years and years ago, I'm not a blonde person, and blonde people and people with curly hair, dark curly hair, feuded in the jungles millions of years ago. And actually it was important back then for people with curly hair to look at blonde people and go, boom, no. It is no longer. Now it's a problem, right? Now you can extrapolate that from all kinds of things. We do this constantly with people. So, for example, one thing that we're very good at doing is deciding instantly whether we're attracted to someone. Right? It's very useful. Right? And we rely on that, and we hone that skill, and we place all kinds of emphasis on it. But sometimes we use that in cases where it's not appropriate. So say I'm deciding whether to hire you. You're coming in for a job interview. The first thing I look at you is, I do when I look at you is I decide, am I attracted to you? Right? That is irrelevant to the question of whether I should hire you for a job.
So do you think all job interviews should be blind then?
I actually think they should. More than that, I think that I think jury trials, I think that the jury should never see the defendant. No good comes out of that. We have really wonderful, in the States, we have incredible data that shows that blacks and whites who are accused of exactly the same crime and with the same sort of level of evidence, blacks are far more likely to be convicted of that crime than whites. And if they're both convicted, blacks are far more likely to get a more serious sentence. That is prejudice, pure and simple. And the only way to respond to that is to make it impossible for the jury to see the defendant. No good comes of it.
Just on the content of Blink, the psychological content of those 2 seconds of instant reaction. I mean, we talked about ethnic background. You are racially mixed. Mm-hmm. Everyone makes decisions about your appearance, and a lot of the material I've read about you refers to your appearance, not so much your ethnic background, but the way that you dress and the way you have your hair. Do you think yourself about what impact you're making in the first 2 seconds?
Well, as is becoming clear in this interview, I'm not terribly self-reflective. But do I? Not so much. I mean, it's not consequential for me. I don't have that kind of job where I'm required to make lots of first impressions. In fact, my first impressions are always the most managed. I mean, I slave over a piece of writing for years and years and years, and that's how people encounter me for the first time.
Well, except I suppose nowadays a lot of people encounter you at your book talks. I mean, you speak to huge lecture theatres full of people, and almost. I mean, do you not think there's an element of which your appearance? I mean, if I just describe briefly, you've got lovely curly hair, lots of it. You've got an open neck shirt, no tie, and it's almost. Do you think? I mean, just asking you to be a little bit more self-reflective for a moment. Do you think it's almost like the uniform of the 21st century intellectual who doesn't have to walk in an office and wear the uniform appropriate to that particular person? I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I'm very bad at this sort of thing. Well, I mean... Why do you hate thinking and talking about yourself, just out of interest?
I don't think I'm that interesting. And it's sort of a congenital disorder, I'm sure.
Your parents didn't discourage you from talking about yourself, did they, by any chance?
No, I mean, I don't think it's polite to be sort of overly self-obsessed. And the world outside me is far more interesting than the world inside me. So
except that the world inside you is the equipment and the tools you use for analysing the world outside you. So surely the interface between the world inside you and the world outside you is incredibly relevant to the job that you're doing.
Yeah, but I don't believe in character. This is totally tangential, I'm sure, to what we're talking about. But all of my books they're all about the same thing, in some sense. Is that they are about how, as human beings, we underestimate the importance of